this point, we're going to flesh out our HTML file quite a bit. We're going to set it up to deliver not only our favicon, but also our CSS and our JavaScript assets. In order to do that, we're going to create a layout file. Now, for a single page application that only has one server-side delivered HTML file, a layout file might be considered overkill, but it's a common enough need and it's very simple that we're going to go through the process of creating one. So I'm going to start by creating a new directory inside of my server directory. I'm going to call that includes. And inside here, I'll create a layout.jade file. The layout file will have the basic wrapper for our application, so that other files can inherit from the layout file and simply define their view-specific content. I'm going to go back to my index file, and I'm going to take the content from it and put it into my layout file. And since we added the static route in our last section, we can go ahead and uncomment the favicon. And now let's also link to our CSS files. We have three that we need to link to. The toaster CSS file, which is inside of the toaster dependency that we installed, our own customized CSS file, and then lastly, we're going to base this on Bootstrap, so we're going to need to link to the Bootstrap CSS file. So let's start by creating a CSS directory inside of public. Now our toaster CSS file already exists inside of the vendor directory, so we won't put that inside the CSS, we'll keep that inside the vendor directory. But let's bring in Bootstrap. And then we'll also create our customized site file. And that's going to be called site.styl for stylus. Now you can see I've gotten the same notification about a watcher for stylus that I did for Jade. Again, this can be useful for debugging, so I'm going to go ahead and add the watcher. And let's take a quick moment and look at how to configure a stylus watcher inside of WebStorm. So again, I've got a link to the command file for stylus on Windows, or on OS X this wouldn't have a CMD extension. The other settings are pretty much the same. In order to make this work, I installed stylus globally. For now, we're going to leave this file blank, but let's include the link to it and our other CSS files. We'll start with Bootstrap. Next will be the toaster file. And finally will be our site file. Notice that I linked to site.css, not site.styl. The stylus compiler will actually respond to the request for the CSS file with the compiled file. The next thing I need to do is deliver my JavaScript files. So I'm going to encapsulate that piece by calling out to an included file. And I'm going to call that file scripts. Now you can see that Jade's giving me a warning because this file doesn't exist. So let's create that file by going to our includes directory and creating scripts.jade. Inside here we'll put all of the script tags. So we'll start with jQuery. Now remember, the leading slashes are very important. Please note that the path to any specific script file might be different on your machine than it is on mine. For example, more recent versions of jQuery actually have a different path than what you see here. So be sure to open up your vendor folder right now and verify that the paths that you put in for your scripts are correct. Next after jQuery will be Angular, and then the Angular resource file, and then the route file. And now we can go back to our layout file, and instead of this h1, I'm going to add a placeholder whose content can be filled in by another file. And now we'll go back to our index file, and we'll make this extend the layout file. And now within here I've got to define that same main content block. This will tell Jade to plug this content into the placeholder inside of the layout file. And we'll create a section that uses the class content. And within that we'll create our h1 that says hello world. So now let's go start up our server and see if our CSS and JS files are getting delivered. Alright, our server's running. So let's refresh our page. And you can see that the font changed a little bit. Let's try it one more time and look at what files are getting delivered. Okay, you can see we're actually delivering a whole lot of files. Let's look at just our style sheets. We can see we're getting the CSS for Bootstrap, Toaster, the site. Let's look at our scripts, jQuery, Angular, and the other Angular files. And you can also see that we're getting our favicon. So now that we're delivering our other assets correctly, we can move on and start implementing our Angular application.